Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive, the podcast that skips small talk and goes straight for the concepts that shape our thinking and behavior. In this podcast, cold expertise is defenestrated as warm philosophy is enthroned in an attempt to explore the field in which we're all scientists looking for answers, living well.
Hello world, welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive with Étienne. Today I'm joined by past guests Patricia Houdukash and Étienne Fortier-Dubois. Hi guys,
Hello.
Hey,
it's really good to have you here, and I'll give a little preamble of what brought us all to this studio today. Etienne recently wrote a wonderful piece on ambition, which is a topic that has been fascinating to me, and I actually have been secretly hoping to have one guest wanting to talk about that on the podcast. So when a nice discussion started around Etienne's essay, I just jumped on the opportunity to have both of you here because Patricia had her contributions to make, and I also had some. But in general, my aim is to just be a listener here to a conversation between two people I really appreciate and like. So that being said, Etienne, I want you to maybe give us an overview of the essay and some of the main ideas or themes that run through it and your ideas about ambition, maybe with an emphasis on how you came to really think about the term and why.
sure, of course. So I decided to write for this because of a prompt on the internet, the blog prize by Effective Ideas. They have a prize every month, and their theme for June was how to increase your ambition. Like this idea that people can do more if they realize that they can do more, basically. And here we're talking about ambition in broad terms, about like, having an impact in the world, doing great things, whatever that means. That could be defined in any number of ways. It's not necessarily, like the sort of prestige ladders that you might think of in the like negative sense of ambition, kind of, but anything, like starting a company, doing like breakthrough scientific research, whatever. If you think that you can do this, then you are more likely to actually do it. So how can you increase that, right? That was kind of the prompt. But for me, the reaction to thinking about this, and that's because of very specific like timing in my life right now, which I'll get into, was okay. Increasing an ambition in like a young person is great, but also it seems like if ambition is not a fixed quantity, if it's something that can be increased, that also means it can be decreased. It can weaken with time, with events in someone's life, and that means that there's also an interesting question of how do you make sure that this ambition, this supply of ambition or agency or will that you have remains good enough that you keep doing things and keep trying to do things even in the face of failure. So that was the starting point for my piece, and then I focused more in the essay on rejection, which to me seems like probably one of the worst destroyers of ambition. When you are repeatedly rejected, it's really, really hard to keep wanting to try. And it's not impossible. Lots of people do it, and you always hear stories of, somebody submitting their manuscript of a novel repeatedly to publishers until 40 publishers later, it finally gets published and becomes a worldwide success, right? There are stories like this, but like the vast majority of people would not reach that 40th publisher that they submit to. The vast majority of people would get discouraged. And so it sparked this reflection that maybe we can do this somewhat better as a society. Getting better at dealing with rejection on an individual basis, which is obviously super hard and something that everyone has to do for themselves, but also maybe there's a sense in which the people who are responsible for, issuing the rejection and the small number of acceptance letters that they send when, they receive books or applications for jobs or applications to grants or schools or whatever. Maybe we can do a little better with not destroying people's ambition, recognizing that this is something that can happen, and like try to, because we're a wealthy society with a lot of means, try to not do this. So that's basically the summary of the essay. And yeah, so I think that this is something that hit a chord with a lot of people, because quite a few people have read it and reacted to the piece. So I think that's a pretty good topic for discussion here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the piece can be found in the show notes, of course. Um, yeah, for me, it was interesting to get into more detail about what ambition is, which I reckon we will in a bit. But Patricia, I just remember that you commenting on it had a nice contribution to make. So how did it strike you, and what is ambition to you? Maybe we can go down that path.
Yeah. When I read it in the morning, I I realized that this essay hit home in many many ways, and I immediately shared it with my friends over WhatsApp, over Twitter, and this actually started a very good conversation. And I also realized that after reading this piece by Étienne, I felt more ambitious, or I felt like I want to become again more ambitious. And I also felt like this trait was quite in decline in my life, at least since, I don't know, 2020. I don't know if this is also because of the pandemic that we went through all together, or because of my personal circumstances in life, or because life gets more and more complex in your late 20s, or honestly I don't know. But I realized that I want to contribute more to the conversation about collective ambition. What does that mean? How can we help each other to remain ambitious? And if we're not ambitious or as ambitious anymore, how can we regain that ambition? And that made me think about resilience. That made me think about how can our peers help us? How can Twitter help us? What can we do to actually nurture this ambition, which I think is quite frail, especially after going together through a pandemic, especially after some of us going through some mental health problems or difficulties. And yeah, to answer your question about my personal definition of ambition, that's quite tricky because since I was a kid, I always describe myself as ambitious. If somebody would ask me, okay, describe yourself, please, the first word that would cross my mind would be, I am very ambitious. And as an immigrant living in Berlin and then in Switzerland, I'm originally from Romania. I always felt like I need this, quality, this trait, this character trait in my life, because otherwise it's very difficult to make it as an immigrant in other countries, or to have a successful life, whatever that means. But as the pandemic hit and other things in my life became more complex, I realized that I've been neglecting this quite a lot, and I I felt in many ways energized by the conversation about the ambition that Etienne shared. And that's why I'm here, because I would love to explore this in more depth with you guys and with everybody.
I'm glad that you think that the piece made you more ambitious. This is great. I mean, it's really, really good to think that the piece can have an actual impact directly on people.
Yeah, yeah, this is super interesting, especially as you bring the immigrant angle into this. To me, I'll just share my kind of first impression of ambition. I think that when I came across David Whyte's poem, David Whyte is a poet with a beautiful book called Consolations, and there he reflects on various words. And I think the first one in the book is ambition because it starts with an A. And there, I think it starts with something like ambition is the ugliest word. And for whatever reason, I at least emotionally, I tend to agree immediately with that because to me, ambition throws me into the world of kind of elbowing your way to the top and competing with others, whether it's in a corporate environment or politics or what have you. And that is kind of the meaning that stuck with me. But at the same time, reading Etienne's essay and coming across other people's definitions of ambition, I couldn't deny to myself that yes, there is something about a fire which burns in you that drives you forward to achieve things, to not stop at the first sign of hardship, that makes you not stop at the first appearance of a criticism on what you do, to have this self-propelling belief, strong belief in your abilities, which is also something you mentioned, which is very interesting to me. And to me, I started differentiating maybe two aspects of ambition, really differentiating these two aspects. On the one hand, the competitive part, which I personally dislike because I think we can all live well at the same time, not at the expense of other people. And the second, which is this impetus to achieve great things, which Etienne mentioned. And yeah, I wonder if that where that takes you, Etienne, and with relation to your essay and your thinking about ambition.
Yeah, it's definitely true that the word can mean different things and even have different connotations. And I didn't actually think about this too much when writing that essay because I think I sort of assumed the like the second definition you gave, right? The more
Hmm.
the drive to achieve things, which is what I hear most now when I hear ambition. But I agree it's not necessarily the case for everyone, and I think most of the time the word is used more in the sort of legibly successful kind of aim that you have to. Though I'm not sure they're that different definitions. It's maybe just the goal that we apply the word to. Is the goal just success in the conventionally defined way, or is it just success in your own defined way, which might be anything from publishing a book to colonizing Mars, right? Whatever you think is actually important for society to or for yourself to do. Um, and interestingly, when like reacting a bit to what Patricia was saying, I don't think I've ever really described myself as ambitious until I got that definition sorted out, which was maybe last year or so. So like the first like 30 years of my life, I I didn't really have like super strongly held goals. Like I didn't want success in some way, but I didn't even really know what success would mean. Um, and it's only a year or maybe two ago, I think, in the blog newsletter that I wrote that essay, that was like my 82nd blog post. But my fourth blog post was called "Becoming Ambitious." So becoming ambitious and now remaining ambitious. And so I think that was kind of the mark of trying to sort of say, hey, ambition in that sense is good, and I probably should be more ambitious. And that means just like, how do you do this? That means, I guess, thinking more about what I want to achieve, what's important, what are my values, and how do I achieve them. Um, and so where was where was I going with this? Ambition is like this thing that I started creating for myself, and I actually started describing myself as ambitious, and I still think I am. And like, for instance, just writing these blog posts, like having a consistent writing practice, is a form of ambition. Um, but also in that year, it went and it came and went, right? And in more recent times, I've found it harder to describe myself as ambitious because it feels like I got a bunch of repeated rejections that sort of made me think, okay, I can't necessarily do these things. What do I want? I don't know what I want anymore. Okay, whatever. I'll just find a job, make money, or something. Not necessarily a bad thing, but like I could feel the shrinkage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I can share my story with ambition. So the story of really starting this podcast, for example, or in general, starting a journey of imparting more of my syntheses on other people, hopefully willingly, hopefully they choose to listen to that. But just even having the understanding that you have something that is worth making, worth putting out there, and it's not too trite or too obvious or has been said a million times before. And I think it's not obvious. This is something that um, is likely to come to you maybe more as you mature, maybe around age 30 or so, where you realize that, well, the understandings that you have that come from synthesizing the specific set of books that you have read throughout your life is worth sharing with people. And there's something ambitious about it, putting yourself out there as some sort of a figure. You might not have broad readership or broad listenership or broad viewership, but still, as soon as you start broadcasting out into the world, you are a public figure. And this is, in a sense, ambitious, sort of
Well,
saying, I am here, I do exist, I have these things to say, which I think are worth saying. And that is not to be taken lightly, because most people, we don't hear from them in any sort of sphere. And many people who do have interesting things to say choose not to in the end, and they never have the ambition um, kindled in them, let's say. So I found that very interesting with my journey, that this ambition has come about. And by the way, yeah, thank you for writing this essay, because I myself finding myself more at ease using the word ambition. I really meant it. It used to be an ugly word for me. But it's interesting because it also touched me when when you talked about rejection. Now, what I do today is I'm a tour guide as a profession and podcaster here. And, I didn't have to go through an interview to start this podcast, which is good, but I did have to deal with the reactions from the surroundings of people surrounding me who care for me or don't care for me. And feedback can be harsh even then. So I'm not interviewed for the job, but not many people believe in someone who goes forward to start a podcast and they're not sure why or what the benefit of that is going to be. And I found that I needed to rely on myself to supply a lot of the belief that keeps me going forward. And I assume this is exactly the type of ambition you're talking about, and so it is very important for me to keep it going and to keep it alive. And um, yeah, so I'm just interested to hear Patricia as well here, chiming in and maybe saying a word on your journey, and how you feel that Etienne's take on it has improved your position going forward.
I think Etienne's essay shed a bit more clarity on what ambition is for me, and why do I feel right now that I lost some ambition in the last 2 or 3 years. So not having enough clarity in my life, and of course being, or actually navigating a lot of unknowns, this somehow made me not so focused on ambition and on pursuing hefty goals. And I realized that the work area of my life was in decline. And actually, that's why I left Switzerland and I embarked on a 5 month sabbatical back in my home country in Romania. I stayed there for 5 months in Transylvania, and I just chilled and relaxed and read books and tried to regain the clarity. But I also realized that I gain a lot of clarity and insights through movement. So by doing things and through actions, and not by sitting all day at home and thinking. So now I'm back in Berlin, and I am out and about exploring, having conversations with people, and trying to shed more clarity on the work life. What does that mean to have, a purposeful work life, how can I find more pleasure and meaning in what I do on a daily basis? And that's for me very, very tied with ambition. Somehow I relate ambition to work, to success as in work life, more than success in romantic life or in any area of my life. So yeah, to answer your question is, I think for me it's all about clarity. And I think that's why that morning when I read Étienne's essay, I was like, yes, that's what was actually missing in my life. Having conversations about ambition and realizing, personally why do I feel that I lost it? And in a way, I didn't lose it. If I'm looking very clearly at what happened in the past 6 months, it was still there, maybe in a dormant kind of way. But I think also having some type of rest is important in regaining your ambition, and that brings me, Eyal, to what you shared about David Whyte. I was attending his 3 Sundays in a row about the art of rest.
Oh, beautiful.
And and that helped me a lot actually at in this stage of my life, having that sabbatical in Romania. What else can I say? I actually wanted to ask you a question about the visual representation of ambition. How do you view ambition? Because I reread today Étienne's essay, and you were writing, Étienne, about mountains as a way of expressing ambition visually. And I was thinking, with what kind of imagery do you associate ambition?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So I have to say the first association would be really more connected to the first aspect, which I agree with Etienne. They're definitely connected because they're aspects of the same thing. But the aspect that you mentioned of competition, of wanting to excel. Now, to excel is not something you can do in a vacuum, right? To excel literally means to stand out. So you need to be standing out from a crowd, right? Um, and this is kind of the first thing that comes to mind. So yeah, there's definitely an aspect of beating your personal best, maybe going up on a mountain, and that's kind of one aspect of doing it. But ambition, at least in our culture, like I can't see it not happening in the context of a competition with other people, or at least recording the time where of ascending the mountain, or doing some sort of thing which can then be compared to really judge whether you've done something amazing or not. And here's an interesting thing, right? Like, is your ambitious goal and the thing you do, is it quantifiable or just qualifiable? Because for some things that you might achieve, people might say, hey, that's not even a big deal for me. So maybe they're trying to belittle you and your achievement because maybe it is super easy for them. But this was your Everest to climb. This doesn't take anything away from your experience and the effort and really the achievement of what you've done.
If I may, there's this tension always between doing goals that are for yourself and doing them in relation to other people, and I don't think you can ever escape this. One part of the essay discussed how to deal with rejection on a personal basis, and one of the potential answers would be not care about what other people think of you. But I don't think that's a very, very good answer, because of course you are going to care what other people think of you. You are going to eventually have to apply to something in a way, not necessarily a classical job interview, like as you discussed with the podcast, but the podcast still applies, like with air quotes, to, like, you're still applying to the approval of people who may or may not watch the podcast, right? So like you can't escape this. And so I agree with you there. The mountain image is good, but it is a bit too solitary for what ambition actually truly is. And it's just a very natural human thing to care, to crave status and crave approval of other people. It's not even necessarily bad. It can be bad if you like sort of exaggerate and like try to focus on status to the detriment of everything else. But yeah, of course, you care about status and being seen as someone who makes good contributions to the world. So for sure, the mountain image is not perfect. The one addition to the mountain image that I like to make is that there are mountains of different heights, and sometimes you realize after having climbed a mountain that there's another mountain next to it that is way taller, so way more ambitious. That then you realize, oh, maybe I should have climbed that mountain instead. Oh, maybe I can still climb that mountain. And maybe you also see other people climbing the same mountain as you and other mountains, and you know you relate to all of these people. It's not mountain climbing seems like a individual solitary metaphor, but when you think about like the Everest, like there's like thousands of people climbing the Everest at any given moment, right? So that's maybe a better image of what ambition looks like in really.
It's interesting for me to think about that for sure. And I want to go back to something which you mentioned, Etienne, which is the kind of things that can help us on our journey versus the kind of things that are burdening us or putting more weight on our shoulders. So in terms of other people's reactions to our ambitions, basically the goals that we want to achieve, and just on a societal level, like any of you can go ahead and answer this, but do you feel like our culture is at all on the right track to empower people as much as possible and empower them in the sense that giving them the sense that they can do it, which is another something that you mentioned that I very much like, because I think that any goal that you set to yourself is necessarily a goal which you at least suspect that you can achieve, right? And it's very important to, first of all, know your skills and abilities so that you're not terribly wrong about this. But you want to always be pushing it in terms of attempting things which you think and hope that you can do it, but you don't know, so that you want to go out and test that, right? And I wonder, like, if any of you wants to jump in and say about something about the experience of what kind of encouragement or disencouragement you've gotten from society.
There's this very nice comic that I almost wanted to include in the essay, but didn't quite fit, which is about this young art like kid drawing pictures in like an Asian family, and not like to use the stereotypes, but Asian families have the reputation of like being very focused on grades, right, and like the legible achievement. And so this like Asian family in the comic, like the dad is there's like two scenarios. One in which the dad is like super encouraging to the kid drawing pictures, and then you see the sort of future where the kid ends up, getting a job at Pixar or something like that. And then you have the scenario where the dad is just no, focus on your grades, uh, and then there's no future scenario. It's nothing that happens. There's nothing great. And then it makes the point. It costs nothing to encourage an artist, right? It costs absolutely nothing, and it can lead to good things. So obviously, in real life, there's complexity, and maybe focusing on grades would actually be the right choice. Like there's like who knows, right? But I do think that there is a movement to recognize that being encouraging. There's a lot of people talking about this online in many places. So I think we sort of know that like encouraging and trying not to discourage people and giving good feedback is good. Like it's not secret knowledge. Um, it's just, I guess, that in practice it's really hard to do because there's a lot of people and a lot of people who want to do art or write or whatever or get a job in a competitive industry or something, and and so it's just hard to do at scale. And so we always kind of default to the easy version of following the default path, like get good grades at school, and also the easy strategy of just saying, thank you for your application. You have an impressive background. However, we have decided not to move forward with your application at this time, which is, the sort of diplomatic message, generic message that you send because you don't want to be angry at the person, but also you have absolutely not a second of your time to give them after you've decided not to hire them. So so that's, I think, kind of the state where we're at, and that's what I discuss at the end of the essay. But there are cases, there's always like some people doing like the extra thing. There's someone I know had an interview for a job that would have been on TV actually, and didn't get it, didn't actually want it. But then the interviewers were like, would you like some feedback on your interview? Like, actually they took the time to, like, I don't know, an hour or something to discuss with him feedback on his interview. And this, I was like, oh wow, this is actually impressive. Like, who does this?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing that I feel we could just do more. It would cost a little. I wouldn't say it's like cost less. Um, but I like, that's something that I think we can afford to do. And in general, being more encouraging, not shutting down. There's like a dark joy in shutting down people and saying your art is crap or your writing is bad or whatever. And and criticism has its place. I'm not saying that we should always be telling everyone your stuff is good. There's definitely a lot of room for criticism, constructive feedback, and also sometimes you really do want a harsh filter to figure out which of the many applicants to a contest are the best, right? You actually like you don't like competition at all, but like competition has its uses, right? So you want that as well, um, but overall, yeah, I think we can do a little better on both aspects of the problem.
I'm feeling very hopeful about this in many ways because I've seen, at least in my corner of Twitter, the emergence of quite many spaces online and also physical spaces that want to cultivate and nurture individual ambition and collective ambition. And I think that's something very promising, to build these spaces where people can come together and start a conversation about how can we remain ambitious, but also on a collective level. Your ambition is my ambition, and vice versa. Supporting each other. So I'm hopeful because of these spaces, especially physical spaces. I don't know why I prefer them more, but I find more value in actually going into a beautiful space. I think because it contributes a lot to our thinking. And I'm also thinking about grants. There are a lot of online grants right now where you can apply and just try every day to apply for one grant. And I think it's a lot about research, so actually knowing where to look and where to ask. But from there on, it's actually it's something that's on your table to apply and to be seen by the people that could give you some money to work on your individual project. And I'm thinking about a grant that I got with the group I am part of called Bloom. And one member of this group, Rick, applied for the grant, I think, just some hours before a deadline. And we all got a grant to meet together and to create some art in Berlin and, exhibit our art in a gallery for one day. And that wouldn't have been possible without, I think, that grant, and also without actually applying and thinking that it's possible for an organization to support our project and our ideas and our collective ambition to create art together.
Yeah, that's such a good advice. I think that the online space is full of people who are supportive, who are wanting others to truly to succeed, and it's definitely a good idea to look for it there if you don't find it with the people around you necessarily, because the old school way of looking at things is maybe a little bit cynical, or not even cynical, but just genuinely worried that it might not be the right path for one to go down, creating things or doing anything too ambitious, you know? An ambitious thing in times of old probably means uh, putting in less time at doing whatever it is that they have been doing for thousands of years, you know? And it's kind of the dreamers and the ambitious people could, in some respect, maybe not pull their own weight if they're turning their attention to this kind of ambitious project, which may or may not succeed. If it succeeds, then it could be something like a new technology that propels the whole society forward, but it could fail. So there is an aspect of risk with ambitious undertakings, but as you say, Patricia, I think that a lot of it can be not only mitigated but promoted with the concept of being a patron of the arts or of any ambitious thing, which I think is a little bit missing in our time and age. So there are the grants, and that's wonderful to hear. So maybe I'm just out of the loop there, but it does seem that there is a wish to see a product before you give it something, whereas I think a couple hundred years ago, it was very common for a person to be a philanthropic in the sense that they believe in their favorite artist and they give them a stipend to just do whatever they do, not knowing if this is going to be a great work or mediocre or not even that.
I think I think it's true that, and there's a lot of people thinking about philanthropy, right? How to do it best, and there's probably some truth to the idea that we don't the old models have sort of waned, and nobody really just supports an artist or a scientist, a researcher, a writer, with no conditions attached, right? To my knowledge, this is actually a big issue in scientific research as well, and why scientific research has sort of slowed down along many measures in the past 50 years. Because scientists just aren't free. You always have to apply to lots of grants that are really hard to get and have to prove your work all the time, and then it's for a limited time, so you can't just explore some weird idea for 20 years, right? Um, so I think, yeah, there's definitely improvements that can be made in this. Though, to give a kind of a little bit of pushback to both what you said, both about applying to grants, for instance. And mostly I agree. Like, you can just apply to things and like something will probably work out. But there was this question when I was writing that essay that came to mind, which is every time you apply to something so let's keep with grants, but it could also be jobs, it could also even be dating. Every time you fail at getting the thing, then you pay a little cost in ambition, right? Or a little cost in willpower, if you wanted to put it in those terms. So it's not like it's costless, and that's really hard to do, because the answer cannot be stop applying. That would be even worse advice. That would be terrible advice. Um, but that was kind of the crux of the problem. Yeah, sure, apply and apply and apply and apply and apply, and then see your ambition decrease a tiny bit every time because you get rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected. Um, so it's still a good piece of advice to just go ahead and try and increase the surface area of your luck by trying as many things as you can, but like be aware that there's a cost to this, and yeah, that's true for grants and the arts as well. And for specifically also the patron of the arts, we hear a lot about the successful artists, but I was just thinking, like, how many artists wanted to be patronized by Lorenzo de Medici or whatever and didn't actually get chosen, and then we know about Michelangelo or whatever, but we don't hear about all the others, right? Um, so I'm not sure. Like, maybe historians of Italian Renaissance or whatever know about this, but I'm not sure that this is actually that great from that angle of rejection.
Indeed, I'm thinking about ambition as energy, and of course we have everyday limited energy, and I think it's the same with ambition, if we apply 100 times and we have 100 rejections, I think, of course, our ambition will take a toll. But I'm also thinking if our goal, if our end goal is something that we view as vital and necessary and something that we have to have. Now I'm comparing with my own situation, personal situation here in Berlin. I'm applying and applying and applying for flats because I want to be able to live in, a home quite soon. And I'm getting rejections and rejections and rejections. And I could be actually, after so many rejections in just 1 week, I could feel right now a lot of despair, and I could feel very, very unconfident, especially even on Twitter, people tell me that some people got an apartment after 4 years, which is not very encouraging because I'm only in week one. But I'm thinking that it's a lot about. I mean, in my case, what keeps me going in this particular personal situation is the fact that for me, failure is not an option. And I know sometimes it's not healthy to think this way. I'm very aware of that. But in this case, I really need an apartment. So this is actually my fuel. I'm just getting more creative. I built with my partner a website where we, introduce ourselves to a potential landlord. Or I'm thinking about creative ways to reach out to Instagram, Twitter, old friends, going out for coffee with different people and ask around. So I think ambition is very important in terms of trying to cultivate it and nurture it every day, and also sometimes having some, how can I say, some moments of respiro, so of some moments of breathing. Because if we push and push and push and push, of course at some point we will just get fed up with whatever we want to achieve, especially if we get a lot of rejections. And I can really relate to this, Étienne, also in the work field, because I got a lot of rejections when I wanted to move from Berlin to Switzerland 2 years ago. And only after 7 months, I got a job. So I had to just keep on going without any promise that actually somebody in Switzerland will hire me with a literature degree. So again, sometimes it's also about, I think, hope. It's about a bit of madness, maybe, or I don't know. But I think the topic of rejection is very important, and I find it very healing that we can talk about it so openly right now here with you and with my close friends and also on Twitter, because in my case, personally, it just keeps me going.
Yeah.
It's interesting the point you make about like you don't have a choice for like you actually have to find a place to live in, and that's also true for jobs mostly. Most people really have to get a source of income, so you keep going, and it can be a very disheartening process. Like nobody likes job hunting, but you do it anyway. So it seems like there's two classes of things you can apply your ambition to. There's the actual basic needs that need to be met, otherwise I die, and then there's the passion projects, art and things like this. And this is probably harder to actually maintain ambition over a long period because then, like, yeah, when you get a few rejections, it's easy to say, okay, I'm not good enough for this, and in any case, it was just for fun, so then you give up.
Yeah, this makes me think in a few directions, so I'll try to stay on track. But first of all, yeah, there's a Latin maxim that says dum spiro spero, which is I hope for as long as I breathe. And I do see that as very important. Now, I was going to joke, Patricia, and say, well, have you considered bribery? This has been a way of getting your way. And but this is a good question, exploring the dark side of ambition, the stuff that it makes you do, not you, but some people, the stuff that it makes some people do if they do indeed feel that this is a goal that needs to be achieved at any cost, and ethics or morals are thrown out of the window for the purpose, right? So this is the dark side of ambition. And also and I don't know how to which way to take, but it also made me think of the typical, let's say, young person from a rough neighborhood who is good at playing football or soccer or any other or basketball and has no one but himself or herself to believe in themselves, and they go with this almost surreal, supernatural belief in themselves until they make it, right? And we know this kind of typical story about the person who rose from the gutters to fame. And I've just been thinking if there are any cases of people who have done that, who have had these huge reservoirs of ambition propelling them forward, that have actually got so uncoupled from reality that they ended up in a bad place? Because I can't think of any obvious examples, but what do you think happens if you have so much belief in yourself that it kind of goes out of hand? Could that happen?
I suspect that this happens quite a lot with politicians. I don't know, but
Megalomania, I guess.
like was that?
Megalomania, I guess.
Yeah, or even you may genuinely think that you really want to have an impact. You're going to be great at this, and you are well positioned because of your like relationships or education or whatever, and then you end up as a leader of a country, and then you can't really say anything. But I suspect that many of them are sort of realize that this is not what they what they thought it would be. But that's just sort of me assuming things. So maybe this is completely fake. Um, but we wouldn't know, right? Because when success kind of is dependent on the approval of others, then you can't just say, "Oh, this actually sucks." And yeah, and I think there's also the idea that fame can also become very um, have a lot of negative effects on people, and so it's desirable, but then when you have it, you're like, oh, this is not actually that great. But I'm not super confident in any of these assertions. Um, but it seems like there's probably a bunch of cautionary tales about like, sure, be ambitious, but be careful what you wish for.
Patricia, do you want to chime in?
I was just thinking that after this episode, I want to do some research on types of ambition to see if there are any. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of research papers on this, and I was
This
thinking
is
also
this
about.
is the research right here. The research is happening here.
Yes, exactly. I was also thinking about healthy ambition. How can we define that, and if that is actually a type of ambition? Of course, every ambition differs. I mean, my ambition is different than yours, Eyal's, and yours, Etienne's. And I'm also thinking right now about collective ambition. What does that mean for each group, for squads, for mini communities, for bigger communities? How can we nurture that ambition? How can we talk more about that? And how can we share our ambitions and not be alone? As Etienne said, the view, of the mountain, hiking alone and overcoming all the difficulties, only to have 99% of the journey hiking and 1% of the journey actually, enjoying the view on top.
I think
Yeah.
if you'll allow me, that this is very connected to the idea of scenes, right? And even scenius, which is the genius of a scene, which is a small group of people who support each other. And and, and what I'm thinking of is we can connect this to something we discussed earlier about status and the approval of others. Seems like a scene might be a good way um, to get the benefits of wanting to have approval to impress people, but without necessarily doing this in a super public facing way. Because the primary thing you care about in a scene is impressing your peers. And because if the scene is well built, those peers are also supportive and will offer constructive criticism, and they also are doing their own thing. So you in like this mutual relationship also offer them support and mutual and constructive feedback. So you get this. You're not alone, doing something that you don't know if other people will approve of, so it's better, but you are a little bit shielded from the harsh world outside that may be full of rejection and discouragement. Ultimately, you'll still have to deal with the outside world. You can't be shielded forever, but maybe it's having a scene, having this group, this collective ambition you're talking about is a good sort of compromise to build things that will last.
Indeed, indeed. And I'm thinking also about trust right now, because in that group that you're a part of course, you nurture trust, and you want the other person to succeed. And of course, you're a bit more comfortable to share your work and your projects and your ideas. And I can relate to this in many ways in my group, because you have the trust and the hope that those people will show up, and they will at least listen.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like the idea of the groups and thinking about collective ambition. I think you're spot on, Etienne, with that scene of people coming together and the oscillation between personal excellence and support as a group. So knowing both to appreciate others and not understanding, then it frames the whole thing not as a competition, but as something that is more about us truly ascending a place together. And you might need um, the flexible person to go across some crevice to maybe anchor a new line for the rest of the group to come, and everybody can be impressed with what they're doing and then follow their footsteps. And the next thing you know, you need the person who is the strongest to maybe really stick the axe into the ice there. I know nothing about ice climbing, by the way. Just making this up as I go. Um,
Yeah, me too.
but I really like going in that direction of collective ambition and really what it means. And I heard this being said before about groups like the Beatles, where you have John and Paul basically trying to impress one another constantly. It's even true in romantic relationships. You do need to be impressed in some sense with the other person. I think that does a world of good to the relationship. I know that we're nearing our hard stop, but why not even think about something light like world peace? Are we being ambitious enough as a civilization? Why is it, maybe this is for next time, but why is it that the most ambitious people in the world that actually take drastic action and try to bring things about as soon as possible tend to be people with quite dystopian views, or dystopian in our mind, but I'm thinking about religious extremism. Um, yeah, so some interesting thoughts there. Um, yeah,
Maybe the
yeah, go ahead.
the a possible answer to this is that, and maybe it's worth like explicitly saying this, ambition works at so many levels, right? It works at the level of the individual, it works at the level of your little group, your little scene, it works at the level of larger communities, and larger communities can also come in many scales, so a city, a country, and the entire world. So you can very much be ambitious for your own city, like if you're the mayor of a city, for instance, that's kind of your job, which means you might be in conflict with other entities, other companies, whatever other cities, and and then sort of because context has put you in this position, then that's what you focus on, and that might be at the detriment of some other goal that works better at a larger or smaller level, and like the entire world. So it's probably something worth thinking about some more. What does it mean to be ambitious at every single scale of human society, and how do these things come into conflict?
Lovely. Patricia, any parting words?
I would love to continue this conversation in other spaces, on Twitter or in real life,
Amen.
because I think it's it's a lot of food for thought there. But as I said in the beginning of the podcast, I'm very energized every time I hear anything about personal ambitions and collective ambitions. Because in many ways I can relate to my own ambition, but also to the group ambition. Yeah. And thank you so much, Ayal, for this opportunity to talk with Etienne and you about ambition.
Thank you so much to you both. My biggest takeaway here is first of all that we do have more to talk about and that we will. But also I want to say that this discussion really feels like it heals something around the concept, and I'm super happy
Yeah.
about that, to feel a little bit more at peace with myself, saying that I am ambitious in at least one sense of the world. So. Thank you very much. Well, thanks, Etienne, for writing the article. I'm going to basically link to your pages and Substacks and whatever projects you're going to want me to. So anybody listening, definitely check these out. And looking forward to next time already.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And like to have maybe last words, I think it's pretty great if just talking about ambition creates ambition. And like, it's a good word. It's a good concept and it's a good discussion. Thank you for this, Ayala.
Thanks so much.